Hi, fifth graders. We're going to start by reviewing dividing when you have a decimal in both your divisor and your dividend. So if you remember from my lesson the other day, the first thing you have to do is move that decimal and make your divisor a whole number. So in this case, I had to move the decimal one place to make that a 3. So I have to come to the dividend and move the decimal one place as well. So now my new problem, and remember I always want you to write the new problem out. There's no decimal now because it's moved to the end of the number, so we can just leave that off if we want. So it would be 2,286 divided by 3. So then we just divide like normal. Does 3 go into 2? No. It goes into 22 7 times. That's 21. I subtract, compare, that's okay. So I bring down my 8. 3 goes into 18 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I subtract, nothing left over, so that's okay. Next step is bring down my 6. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Nothing left over, nothing more to bring down. So my final answer on this would be 762. Notice I do not need a decimal because the decimal is at the end of the number. Okay, we're going to try a little bit harder problem. Notice that this time you do have a decimal again in both your divisor and your dividend, but notice that your divisor has 2 digits that aren't zeros. We've been solving those kinds of problems with 2 digits in the divisors, so your step is no different. The first thing you need to do is get rid of that decimal. If you remember, we bounced the decimal to get rid of it. In this case, we had to bounce it 2 times though. So I go over into my dividend and I bounce it 2 times as well. And then of course that's going to be where my new decimal point is between the 4 and the 8. Remember that it's easiest if you rewrite the problem every single time once you bounce that decimal. So now it's 514 and 8/10 because my decimal moved 2 places, divided by 33. Now I'm going to solve this one the same way that I've solved all of the other problems we've done. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to round my divisor, 33. I'm going to round it to 30. Does 33 go into 5? No. Does it go into 51? Yes. How many times? Remember, this is where we use our front end of the problem. How many times does 3 go into 5? If you said once, that is correct. Now remember, for our multiplication step, we have to go 33 times 1, though, not 30 times 1. We go 33 times 1. I subtract. I can't do 1 minus 3, so I have to borrow and make it an 11. So 11 minus 3 is 8, and 4 minus 3 is 1. I compare. 18 is smaller than 33, so that's okay. So I bring down my next digit, which is the 4. Then I start all over again. So remember, my new problem is how many times does 33 go into 184? So to get me started, how many times does 3 go into 18? If you said 6 times, you are right. I'm going to show you something though. When I come off to the side and try to solve 33 times 6, 6 times 3 is 18. I carry a 1. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 1 is 19. That's 198. So hopefully you see that 198 is too big because it's 184 that I'm going into. So 6 is too big, which means I'm going to go into it 5 times. So now I'm going to go 33 times 5. Notice I just do it off to the side. 5 times 3 is 15, carry a 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 more is 16. So 165. I subtract. I can't do 4 minus 5, so I have to borrow. 14 minus 5 is 9. 7 minus 6 is 1. Can I have 19 left over? Yes, I can. It's smaller than 33. So I bring down my 8. Now, if you notice, the new problem is 33 into 198. But if you look over here to what we were doing before, you'll see that that problem's already been solved for you. So instead of having to say how many times does 3 go into 19, it does still go 6 times, you can save yourself from having to do the math twice. So now I see that 33 times 6 was 198. I subtract. There's nothing left to bring down. You can have 0 left over. So there's one last step. What do you think it is? Yes, if you remember, we have to place the decimal in our answer, and we simply go straight up with it. So my final answer would be 15 and 6/10. Here's another problem, 5th graders. So remember our first step, move that decimal in the divisor. How many places? 2 places. So I'm going to go to my divisor. I'm going to do the exact same thing, move that decimal 2 places. So now it's between the 8 and the 1. Remember, I need to rewrite the problem. Don't try to work on the one with all the little bounce marks. So I have 6,488 and 1/10. Notice the place of the new decimal. And then I can get rid of that 0 and decimal point because I bounced the decimal out of the way, so it is 81. Okay, I estimate 81 becomes 80. And then I solve it just like I did double-digit division. Does 81 go into 6? No. Does it go into 64? No. Does it go into 648? Yes, it does. How many times? Look at the small problem. If you saw the 8 and the 64, you are right. How many times does 8 go into 64? If you said 8 times, that is correct. So now I come off to the side. Remember, I have to times the 81 times 8, not 80 times 8. So I end up with 648. I subtract, and I have 0 left over. That's okay. I can have anything less than 81 left over. So I bring down my next digit, which is an 8. Then I have to start all over again. How many times does 81 go into 8? Well, hopefully you know that it doesn't go in at all, so I'm going to put a 0 up there. Multiply. 81 times 0 is 0. I subtract. I have 8 left over, which is okay. And I bring down my 1. How many times does 81 go into 81? 1 time. I subtract. There's nothing left over. Am I done? Hopefully you noticed we have one last step, and that is to bring that decimal up and put it straight up from where it was. So my final answer would be 80 and 1/10. One last problem, 5th graders. 138 and 26/100 divided by 6 and 2/10. All right, what is our first step? Bounce the decimal. If you said bounce the decimal, good job. So then remember, I have to rewrite the problem. So the decimal disappeared. It becomes 62, and it goes into 1,382 and 6/10, because that's the placement of my new decimal. Remember, then I round. The 62 rounds to 60, and that simply helps me get started. Does 62 go into 1? No. Does it go into 13? No. Does it go into 138? Yes, it does. How many times? Look at the small problem. How many times does 6 go into 13? If you said 2 times, good job. So I'm going to come off to the side and go 62 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 times 2 is 12. So I'm going to subtract 124. 8 minus 4 is 4, 3 minus 2 is 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. My next problem, or my next step, is to bring down the 2. Then I start all over again. How many times does 6 go into 14? If you said 2 again, that is correct. Now, I don't have to redo my math for 62 times 2. I've already done it off to the side. So I can just do 124. Subtract, I can't do 2 minus 4, so I have to borrow. 12 minus 4 equals 8. 3 minus 2 equals 1. Can I have 18 left over? Yes, I can. And I bring 6 down. I start all over again. This time my small problem, how many times does 6 go into 18? It goes in 3 times. So I come down here and write 62 times 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. Nice number to work with. I end up with 0 left over, which is okay. And then the final step, if you remember it, is to bring that decimal straight up. So my final answer ends up being 22 3/10.